a grade out of 10, right? And then an overall grade again as to which one I think is my favourite. Right, so I'm going to do an individual, that's right, I'm going to do an individual grade and then a grade for the overall, which I think was my favourite. Okay, so one grade for each and then a grade again for my overall favourite. Individual mark out of 10 after I sum up the few sentences for each one, and then after I've summed up each one I'll give the second grade, which is my favourite overall. Okay? I will say, right, I thoroughly enjoyed all three, right? Okay, that's it. I'll start doing my little sum up now. Okay, so I'll say more in the summing up. Okay, but I will say I did thoroughly enjoy all three. But gutted, but feel a bit weird, strange, because on doing them I've discovered there are loads of fan films out there, so I feel a little bit awkward just doing the three. I do feel a little awkward just choosing these three. Why choose this one out of the two obvious ones? But that was the only one, other than Happy Halloween and Never Hide in the Snow. That was the only other one I knew of at the time. At the time of me doing Never Hide in the Snow and Happy Halloween, it was the only other one I knew of at the time. And then I started doing them, and then I started doing it. I'll start with Halloween Returns, okay? Basically, I started watching that one, and I felt slightly embarrassed when I was watching it, because it was obviously had zero money spent on it, and a lot of kids behind it. It was dead obvious from the get-go, and the aspect ratio just knocked me sideways. I just thought, with that one, Halloween Returns, yeah, it was how basically not to do a short. Sorry. Weakest of the three, but it wasn't shit. I wrote down here. It wasn't. It had severe overuse of original score. Severely. It obviously must have been to compensate the lack of competence in regards to its direction, or its DP, or its editing, or its the budget it had behind it. It must have been because of that. Its aspect ratio the aspect ratio was presented in just foul use of aspect ratio. Just terrible decision to use aspect ratio. Again, how not to produce a fan film short. How just basically not to. It had the weakest ending out of all the three. Extremely so. Extreme weak ending. But I did say when I was speaking specifically about that short, it did get me to jump out my seat. I got a genuine scare from it. 2 out of 10. Sorry, but I couldn't give any higher than that. Couldn't. Okay, moving on to Never Hike in the Snow. Alright. I wrote down how great it was to see a dramatic segment in it. How absolutely wonderful it was to see a dramatic segment in that short. It being a definite highlight of, and I wrote down here, of all three shorts. That dramatic segment, a definite highlight of all three. If I had to choose one part of a short which out of all three stood above, it was the dramatic segment in Never Hike in the Snow. It was that dramatic segment which involved the mother and the grey-haired police officer. That whole section, what with, again, we're not getting that dramatic segment in its sequel made a few years ago. That as well made me think how wonderful to get the dramatic segment in Never Hike in the Snow. It was an absolute standout highlight out of all three of them, that was. It was obvious from the get-go it had a budget. Okay. But alas, its kick-off moment, I wrote down here, I paid attention to that in my summary here, but alas, its kick-off moment in regards to its use of spatial awareness, where right at the beginning and the section and the scene section which was used in its trailer, the distance between Jason and the guy in the yellow, I forget his name now, that when the camera panned out and we saw that distance between the two characters, as Jason took the shot, the arrow, the distance which the arrow had to travel, that was just, it was unforgivably, it was done wrong, unforgivably misdirected, miscalculated to produce such a misdirected shot. To the eye, to the viewer, to me certainly, it was just off. That distance was just, that distance, that shot, whether it be the distance or the shot itself, that presentation of Jason in which the arrow, the distance the arrow had to travel, that was off to me, completely off. And wrote down here in capital letters, unforgivable. That was unforgivably off for me. Yeah. I have wrote the word down wonderful, 8 out of 10. 8 out of 10, no hiking snow. So, that's obviously first so far. Happy Halloween. Got to see Jimmy Champane in character, other than when he is in his videos, when he's presenting his videos on YouTube. Got to see Jimmy in character, and that was like, Jimmy in character. I'll put down here a big smiley face, exclamation, 2 exclamation marks. You didn't just get 1 exclamation mark, Jimmy, you got 2. Right. To see you in character, Jimmy. Got to see your dad as well. Now, I know where you get your looks from now. Yeah. You certainly don't get them from your father, Jimmy. Right. I wrote down here, ... fantastic. Great. It was great to see you in it. It was actually great to see you in it, Jimmy. It was. Great use of space in that segment in the house when that guy in the skeleton suit ran off to take cover, to take shelter after Michael had smashed his friend's head against the gravestone. When the guy, his friend, the then now deceased lad's friend, ran off to take cover in the house, and we saw in that house that whole segment where a whole bunch of people got slaughtered. The volume came right down, and then we saw, as the camera was looking at that guy in complete shock as to what was happening, we, the viewers, were watching him go through his memory. We were shown clips of what he was thinking in his memory as the camera stayed on him. We were privy to seeing the people, the whole group of people in that house get knocked off one by one, and also him in the skeleton suit. That whole section there, fantastic use of spatial awareness in the direction, in the art of the direction. Absolutely fantastic, spot on, absolutely spot on. I wrote in here in its summary, it's fantastic spatial awareness in this short, absolutely fantastic. Unfortunately though, this one did have an air of an originality. As great as it was, as obviously as great and wonderfully entertaining as it was, it did have that air of an originality. Even though Never Hike in the Snow had cast members, cast members who were acting out original characters from the franchise, from the Friday the 13th franchise. Even though we did get them back, we got a few returning. Even though we got the recognisable characters returning in that show, there was something about Happy Halloween which did have, it had a greater sense of an originality to it. Just something about it, it stood out loads to me that had this, it had an air of an originality to it. it just did, right now. Yeah, it did, yeah. As great as it was, it did. Great sadness losing such a young-looking kid to the shape. And I emphasise, I underline the word looking, young-looking kid. I feel he was miscast because he looked so young. Great sadness in losing such a young-looking kid to the shape. It was great sadness. I thought that was off. Yeah. Okay. 8 out of 10. I've put down 8 out of 10 for that as well, for Happy Halloween. I've given Happy Halloween 8 out of 10 as well. Yeah. Both obviously professional outings. Both of them, Never Hike in the Snow and Happy Halloween. Both of you, obviously professional. Obviously. Both professional outings, obviously they were to the viewer. Just obviously they were. That was the major advantageous. That was the major advantage over Halloween Returns, was that you two 8 out of 10s were obvious professional affairs. My favourite for the 2nd grade is my favourite. It's going to be marking for my favourite. I will say my favourite overall, I will say at 3. It has to be the one thing a horror movie aims to do, which the makers themselves probably get the biggest kick out of achieving when they watch an audience watch their material. It's whether or not the audience get a genuine scare. And I did with Halloween Returns. So as obviously unprofessional that was, I'll have to give that grade to that short, to said short, 219's Halloween Returns. These 3, the reason why I picked these 3, I will say my disclaimer as to my why disclaimer, right? Couldn't get away from the PR brigade for Never Hike in the Snow. Couldn't escape that, right? Happy Halloween, again, couldn't really escape that. I just went online and I think what YouTube had selected for me is the reason why I chose Halloween Returns. Okay, and it's only since doing the 3, choosing the 3 and then watching the 3 that I've discovered in my recommended section that there are many other Halloween fan films as well, and more Friday the 13th fan films as well. So it's nothing personal against other fan films, i.e. the fan films which I haven't chose as these 3. Nothing personal against you lot, and it's nothing personal for you, the 3 who I chose to do as my Halloween tribute 2020 for my channel. Nothing personal as to for you 3 guys. It's just simply the way it's worked out. Halloween Returns. That short suffered greatly because of the aspect ratio. That suffered greatly. For a kick-off, before one is even beginning to watch it, one notices that it's suffering with its aspect ratio. All 3 were made on the cheap. All 3 had virtually the same cast, same number of cast members in. All 3, if you will, had the same quality of script. All 3 were budgeted short movies. In regards to the ego, each ego attached to each of the 3 shorts, they were all equal in their own stature. The only thing that set them apart were their styles, ultimately, in which they were filmed. Now maybe Halloween Returns suffered because that was made a good 12 months before the other two. Right, maybe so. But I will say, that short suffered severely with the aspiration in which it was presented in. Okay, I think it suffered. Right, I think it would have been a lot better as a viewing experience if it was presented in letterboxed form. I know it's all 16:9 are considered widescreen. I appreciate that dimension. That is considered anamorphic widescreen. But if they're not letterboxed, I have black bars above and below using, say, the 235, 240, then these shorts do suffer. I guess that's due to budgetary reasons that they suffer. Yeah. I enjoyed all three equally. Because I appreciate there was a year gap. There was a year between Halloween Returns and the other two. Okay, so regardless of the aspect ratio, I will give that benefit of the doubt. If you're watching this, you guys who made Halloween Returns, if you're watching this, let me know. Why did you choose that particular aspect ratio to present your short in? Why? You were a bunch of young people in Halloween Returns. You were basically a bunch of kids in Halloween Returns. The 4 or 5 of you on the screen. You were just kids. There must have been adults involved. Nothing is free these days. It's still, even though all three shorts were made with extremely tight budgets, there would have been money involved with all three of them. Therefore, adults involved. Yeah, you can comment below in regards to the guys, you guys, if you're watching, you guys watching Halloween Returns, if you can mention below what made you present your short in that particular aspect ratio, in the non-letterbox aspect ratio. I will say, it did have a narrative running through it, a watchable narrative. I do commend your short for that. And the kids who you used, especially the dark-haired girl, I would say she was your, I would say she was the best at the bunch, the dark-haired girl in your short. The lad who never smoked a cigarette, I think he was the weaker out of all the bunch of actors. I think he was the weaker. Spoiler, I will say his kill, right, his kill scene where he gets it basically came to me completely out of the blue. I thoroughly enjoyed his kill. I was watching him approach, watching him have his little argument with his girlfriend, as his little bickers who was to go and get the beer, walking through the kitchen, opening the fridge at the beer, and then we got his kill scene. That just came to me great out of the blue. I jumped in my seat. On that note, okay, I'll move on swiftly on to the two. Okay, before I decide which ultimately I will choose ultimately. Okay, I will choose which of the three was my favourite. Okay, I will do. Alright, because I'm beginning to enjoy this little upload. Okay, making this little review. I'm beginning to enjoy it. So I'm going to take the time and I will consider which of the three I felt the best and was the strongest. So I'll consider the two grades. Right, okay guys, I'm going to go on to say about the second in our list for my short for the channel for Warren and Tears box. It being movie related, so it's going on my movie related channel, my multimedia home media channel. Okay. Second of the three, I'm going to touch on. I'll do the Friday 13th one because I've just done a Michael Myers one. So it's Never Hike in the Snow. Right. Now, I'll say, the kick-off for this one, like the kick-off for Halloween Returns, was its aspect ratio. Right? The kick-off for Never Hike in the Snow, I will say, is the gap was far too short between Jason and the guy in the yellow waterproof jacket. For the distance for the arrow to travel, for it to hit him and then to take him to the floor, as the camera opened right out to its widest so we could see both of them, that distance between the two of them was too small. I'll say that from the get-go, the kick-off, before I actually begin to talk about this one, that distance was far too short, which we were led to believe in the scenes building up to that final moment where Jason was to take his arrow. The build-up scenes to that moment, I certainly, the viewer, was led to believe that distance which we then saw in said Whiting shot was going to be a lot larger. Okay, how they would have handled that in regards to filming it, that's not my problem as the viewer. That ain't my problem, right? That's not my responsibility. My responsibility as the viewer is to be able to watch it and get whatever I get from it. Right? That's where my responsibility, if you will, lies, stops, ends. Right? It's the duty of the makers of these shorts. It's up to them to do all that. Right? To do the filming, the direction, the editing, etc., etc. It's up to them. So I will say, with the greatest respect, that distance was far too short. I was led to believe that distance between the two of them was going to be a lot larger. The greatest respect, that completely ruined the entirety of that short for me. Right. I noticed it in the said trailer that distance was too short, looked too short. But I went away from that trailer. I went away thinking, well, they're going to fix that for the short itself. They'll fix that. That's simply just for the trailer. And then on seeing it, the short, when I actually pressed play, when the short finally came to be, and I played the short, sat down to watch the short in its entirety, it was still there. It hadn't changed, it hadn't altered. The same scene, it hadn't been altered. It was that same shot which the trailer had used. It was exactly the same shot. And I was just left then thinking, WTF? Exclamation, exclamation. Come on, write down in the comments below. You're obviously watching this video of mine because you've seen the three shorts. Well, you've probably seen, out of the three, you would have seen Never Hike in the Snow. Did you find that as well on watching Never Hike in the Snow? Did you find, could you agree with me there? Are you nodding in agreement as you're listening to me saying that? Are you nodding to say, yeah, you thought the same? Did you think the same on watching the short? That distance was just, to me, it was just too easy and unfair for Jason to hit the guy in the yellow. It was just too easy, therefore it ruined, it took all the suspense, took all the excitement, the suspense away from me as a viewer. I was sitting there thinking, well, even I could probably hit the guy in the yellow. We were getting the scenes and shots of the guy running and stopping and turning around and running, and he even went through an area where there was not that much snow on the vegetation, where he stopped to turn around, and then he continued on. There were shots, really nicely crafted shots, where we could see the guy was obviously an athletic guy, and to get that open widescreen shot of the two of them, they were virtually together. When Jason went for his arrow, they were virtually together. Jason was right on top of him, and no, it wasn't that that Jason could. It just proves that Jason could be anywhere, at any time. No, because the distance wasn't that short. The distance was at a point to give the viewer that sense of proportion of distance. So it's not one. It wasn't one of them where, oh, Jason could be anywhere at any one time. No, and believe me, these things, that thought's already, I've already digested all that. I've already given the short the benefit of the doubt for that, etc., etc. Comment below, what did you think about that? Well, I continued watching, and we got this drama piece. We got a continuation. We got a the next major piece of narrative was a piece of drama. Where inside the mother's house. Just remembered saying that we got a segment where the two coppers were introduced to the two coppers in the woods at the scene of the crime, where the guy in the yellow coat had fell. Jason obviously leaving the body there. I thought that was a bit. What else could they do in a short? I was going to say I thought that was a bit rushed, because that led me to believe I was slightly confused in that little segment where we introduced the policeman. I was slightly confused where I thought, is the dead body there? As the policeman looking down at all the blood. What with the darkness, the surrounding, the enveloping darkness, I tried to look to see if the guy was there, the one in the yellow girl. I couldn't make out whether he was there or not. It was only as I continued to watch the short that I realised, spoilers, I realised that the guy wasn't there. You see, because the two policemen are discussing about cleaning up the scene. So even after the segment is finished, that segment where they were introduced to the two policemen in the dark, even as the guy goes for his back assault, as one of the policemen goes back assault, we're still not. But I still wasn't 100% clear whether the gentleman was there or was recovered from the scene. As I say, it was only later on in the short that I discovered that the guy wasn't left there. Jason hadn't left him there. It was simply the two policemen were onlooking a scene of blood spatter on the snow without the victim being there. I say, what with it only being a short, that piece sort of like slightly that bit in the narrative was slightly confusing. I will give the short the benefit of the doubt, it being the short. I will give them the benefit of the doubt there. Yeah, rolling on. The narrative continued where, say, there was a drama segment which I was immediately intrigued by, because the sequel to this, the movie Womp Stomp, the short Womp Stomp films did prior to this, which happens to be this one's sequel, was non-stop action all the way. It was non-stop. It was a fluid narrative. The guy out in the wilderness. I can't think of the name of that now. Hiking, so was it? I can't think of the name of that. It wasn't short. It was like a half-length movie, wasn't it? That one was a basic hunting down and killing someone with a start and a finish, and that's what that one was. There was no quiet, dramatic inserted segment at all in that one. Whereas with this one having that, I was intrigued. I was really pulled in. I was drawn in by it. I was pleasantly intrigued to see that there was this dramatic segment there with the mother of the lad who was the victim, as we saw in the beginning of the short. I was pleasantly intrigued to see this dramatic piece. And it worked as well. The two policemen worked. They were well cast. The mother, I thought she worked well. I thought she was well cast as well. That whole section where they're in the bedroom and he was deliberately misleading her to saying that no, the body hadn't been found. But it hadn't been found. But that's where I was going to say then. But certainly I as a viewer, still didn't know at that point whether or not the body had been recovered. The chap, her son, the chap and the Elka girl, I still at that point wasn't clear. Get me? That's where my confused. That's where I say. That's why I'm touching on that now, where the clarity of that bit, that section of the narrative, wasn't quite clear to me, even at the well into the midway point of the short. Only say later on in the show, I was certainly for sure that the guy and Yelka girl wasn't recovered at the scene. I was led to believe. I was watching that lovely little dramatic narrative piece which involved the mother. I was watching that thinking, is the policeman deliberately lying to the mother in regards to the finding of her son? Is he deliberately saying that no? Did he earlier discuss with his fellow policeman? No, we shan't tell the mother that we recovered the one. We'll just tell her so much at this point about just perhaps the car was found and that he was definitely missing, but deliberately holding back on the finding of the body. Say at this point it wasn't quite clear, and I think that is probably just simply down to the fact that it was a short. I will give the benefit of the doubt. I will give it the benefit of the doubt, but I have to mention it because it still was an ambiguity in my mind as a viewer. It was nice to see this short pay homage to more so to the roots of the Friday the 13th franchise, with the coming on toward the end of the short now with the inclusion of Jason's mum. Definitely return to the roots here. Great. The emphasis, the payoff regarding Jason's mum, because of the return to the roots, to the bare roots of the franchise. We've got Tommy Jarvis returning, and we have Jason's mum returning. Great to see, even for I to see. So I can't imagine what a buzz a diehard fan would have got from this short. It was handled brilliantly. Mrs. Voorhees, she was handled brilliantly. That whole homage to that character, the whole dream sequence, the dealing of CGI in regards to that whole sequence. Was she going to remove the mask after she'd reached forward to Jason as she was stepping forward toward him? Was she going to remove the mask? Was she, as she finally approached him and laid her hands on him as he knelt, were we going to see Jason's mask being removed? Were we going to see it being removed? Was she going to remove it? That's exactly how I watched it. Exactly. I was thoroughly gripped, thoroughly enjoyed it. Because the whole package, the way the CGI was handled here, the character play between the two, the chemistry between the two players was fantastic. The way it was handled, the way it was directed, the way it was filmed, the removing of Jason's mask, and they dared to reveal Jason's face in its entirety. They dared to go there, and again it was handled brilliantly. It worked. It completely worked. In the reboot in 2009, I think it was 2009, there was a lot of emphasis on the fact that Jason was deformed. He was physically deformed in the facial area. So the casual viewer would have known what to expect with the removal of the mask. And it didn't make me cringe. It wasn't cheesy. It didn't look cheap. The way it was filmed, the way it was directed, it was great. It was just fantastic. It was great. I got to see the character, the guy at the beginning of the short, the guy in the yellow coat. I finally got to see what had happened to his body. In this section of the segments was the way the camera panned out from his face as he was laying there in Jason's shack, or whatever Jason was living. The way the camera panned out from his face, the way that was introduced to the viewer, like this is where he is now with Jason. All that was photographed wonderfully, absolutely spot on. The way we got all the lights going out for us to suddenly find Jason not kneeling down at said shrine, for the police officer to suddenly discover that Jason was not there at the shrine any longer, and then we continue to watch the demise of said police officer. I thought all that was a little bit. Sorry, it was just too on the nose. It was too tacky is the word. It was too cheap. It was too cheap for me to give that they were under certain budget restrictions. I can't give it the benefit of the doubt. I've given each of these shorts enough benefit of the doubt already. I will stick to my critique. It was a little cheap. I will say that's the only place where I thought the CG was a little bit ropey. Otherwise, I think the CG did hold throughout. Whether I thought it was my favourite out of the three, I will say toward the end. I'll say at the end, okay? Happy Halloween. Right, and a happy Halloween to you, viewers. First thing I will say about getting the rights to the Halloween franchise, Halloween universe, having the rights to original Halloween music, assumably owned by John Carpenter and his son Cody. It must be owned by them. I was trying to grasp context of Halloween, of Happy Halloween. I was then thinking, well then whereabout could it be inserted into H40? And because I didn't see that insertion of an original clip from H40 in your title sequence, because I didn't see that until the third, could have been even fourth viewing, I was completely lost. I think the curiosity factor as to where it could have been slotted into H40, it just completely took over me. So I will say, for the kick-off, Happy Halloween's kick-off, before I even say anything, is the curiosity factor which I had, which did overdrive my viewing concentration. It did compete heavily for my viewing concentration until I did see the Blink and You Miss clip in the intro sequence. Once I'd seen that, it completely clears everything up. For example, as to why he was putting the poker, as to why in your short, Jimmy, Shape was putting the poker in the shoulder, and also whereabouts the scene could possibly have been lost from. I thought it was a great bonus for your short, Jimmy, that you got the rights to use that clip, and also the original music from the score. I can only assume, Jimmy, you got the rights to be able to use the clip and the music, the said clip and music, before you even drafted out your screenplay. Correct me if I'm wrong. On reviewing your show, Jimmy, I'm thinking now, should I detract points? Should I detract? Because it wasn't, because really, one could say your short wasn't exactly original. Yeah, get me? But also I'm thinking, should I give your short benefit of doubt because it was a short, and that you did do it on, basically, in your description you said that you did it on no budget. I'm thinking, which side of the fence should I lean? Should I detract or totally ignore and just go along with it and just take it as the fact that it did give me, the viewer, a quality viewing experience? I'm not quite sure at this moment in time. Having said that, all 3 shorts I'm reviewing now in this upload did use what I thought on watching original music. All 3 did. This particular short, Happy Halloween, is the only one I can recall to actually use original visual footage. Halloween Returns, especially out of the 3, looked like they suffered with lack of budget the most, and to be quite honest with you, it was slightly overkill in their short. The music was slightly used a little bit too much, I thought, but yeah, still effective in that. That short was still effective. As I say, I did actually physically jump out my seat at one point in that. I digress. Back onto this one. Happy Halloween. Yeah, Jimmy, I will say, regardless of the fact that I did think your short perhaps was the least original out of the 3, I will put that aside and I will continue as a fresh, so to speak. Without further ado, Jimmy, I will say I still stand by my comment on your channel. I left on your channel probably about 2 weeks ago now that I was agreeing, well, I didn't leave the comments, I was agreeing with some people leaving comments on your channel that the lad used, the one who was wearing the clown mask. There were some people in your channel saying about that he was perhaps too young to be killed by Michael, and you were saying your response was, all fair dues, with great respect, your response was, well, there was a kill of a kid in H40. I did say that I thought that he was probably, the way he looked, that he possibly looked too young. Maybe that he was miscast because he looked too young, and I stand by that. His skin was dead soft, his eyes were very childlike, very immature, very pre-9, pre-8 looking eyes. His hair was very, the way his hairstyle was, that it was very, his fringe was very fine, brushed down against the forehead, and then the colouring of the hair as well, and the lad's mannerisms as well, his body language combined with his mannerisms, all led me to believe, which is why I left that response saying that he was possibly miscast. Okay, yeah, he may have been the same age, but I think possibly miscast, that he looked too young, possibly looked too young. I think that was the problem there. I was shocked and taken aback that he was taken by the shape. I was completely, for the reasons mentioned, yeah. I think the whole setup you used in the kitchen, dining, stroke, living room, the all-in-one area, more specifically the kitchen area, I think that whole setup there, the more or less the central setting for this short, I thought the way that was photographed and handled was absolutely genius. Just the most trivial of vloggers and uploaders to YouTube know just how difficult it is to direct a shot, to find somewhere to shoot, just how difficult it is to edit, to organise, find time, etc, etc. I knew straight away just by looking at that whole central pivotal setting where the guy ran to in the skeleton suit after the shape had smashed that young lad's head against the gravestone, the head of the gravestone, where he ended up in that house. That whole central setting where the volume went right down, and we saw it almost from the guy in the skeleton suit's point of view, but we didn't. It was exceedingly clever the way the volume went down, and yet we did see it from his point of view, yet we were allowed to see him and his surroundings, and just as it was all going on, the shape obviously finding where he had fled to. And then it wasn't even it was that good that it didn't even need slow-mo. Like, few minutes sequence. Absolute genius, I will say. The way I say, the genius of the whole shot, it was set up that other people were in the shot and then went out the shot. Enough we saw as a viewer, we were able to see enough for our imaginations to allow us then to know what was going on. The way one of the guys banged up against the fridge after he was stabbed, that was there in the audio intact. Just brilliant, brilliant. And then it went full circle with seeing the young lads at the end. Well, saw him bossing off, and we found out how the connection was between him and the shape. We discovered then, only toward the end, we discovered how those two characters were connected. And that was it. I think that's how it ended, where we saw the boy just bossing off on his bike. It was right, we saw the shape step out, didn't we, of the corn, and then it cut to black, didn't it? Keep watching, sub up, share, comment, thumbs. See you around.